On the Dersh Show today, I will have the honor of interviewing Megyn Kelly, somebody who I've long admired, who I regard as one of the great journalists of the age. And I'll be asking her hard questions about her role, what she has done, why she's doing what she's doing now, Hunter Biden, Jeffrey Toobin, the media, left, right, the election, the future of America, all that on the Dersh Show. On the Dersh Show today, before we get to the great interview that I anticipate having with Megyn Kelly, who's one of my heroes and one of the great journalists of the age, I want to talk about the Hunter Biden matter. Look, I'm a liberal Democrat, and I generally support Democratic candidates. I've so far never voted for a Republican candidate for president of the United States. I'm not revealing my vote in this election, but I'm entitled, you're entitled, we're all entitled to hear from Joe Biden, from Hunter Biden, is this a true story? What is the truth? Was it your laptop? Did you bring it into a repair shop? Do they have the recordings that have been shown and played? Do they have the email references that the New York Post has reported? What is the truth? Did you get your job because you were perceived as somebody who can help make introductions to the then Vice President of the United States, your father? These are the kind of questions that we should be asking. We didn't hear these questions asked up to now. We're going to have another debate. It's going to be moderated by a tough journalist. I wish it were Megyn Kelly. But it's another journalist, and I think they will press Hunter Biden. In the last debates, the moderators didn't press hard enough. People were allowed not to answer questions. Vice President Pence didn't answer the question what he would do if the President of the United States lost the election and refused to leave office. He didn't answer that question. Joe Biden didn't answer the question about whether he believes in court packing. He told us he's going to give us that information before the election. We haven't heard him comment much about his son, except to say, and I was very moved by what he said, that his son did have a drug problem and he's overcome it. And I'm very sympathetic. And I wish Joe would just come out and tell us exactly what happened. I don't believe that Joe Biden is corrupt or has done anything corrupt or could be corrupted. I've always thought of him as a deeply honorable man. I've known him for many, many years. But when you refuse to answer questions, when you duck questions, that does create a kind of presumption that you have something to hide. I contrast that with myself when I was falsely accused. The first thing I said was, I'm going to answer every single question. I'm going to produce every single document. I'm not hiding anything. I hope there are videotapes of every moment of my life. I hope there were videotapes of everything that happened in Jeffrey Epstein's home, because I know I did nothing wrong. And if you've done nothing wrong, you ought to be the one out there asking for the investigation. You ought to be the one telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And this story is not going to go away until and unless both Joe Biden and Hunter Biden come out and tell us what actually happened. We're entitled to know that. We're entitled to President Trump's tax returns. We're entitled to the information about his business dealings, and we're also entitled to hear about Hunter Biden's business dealings and whether or not his father had any involvement, made any meetings based on introductions. The American public has the right to know everything before they vote. And we're going to hear a lot more about that in my interview with Megyn Kelly coming up right now on the Dersh Show. We have our first guest in the history of the Dersh Show, and I'm so honored that it's Megyn Kelly, who I regard as one of the great journalists of our time. She is a best-selling New York Times author. She has interviewed everybody on the face of the earth. She famously or infamously moderated the debate between now President Trump and then candidate Clinton. And she has done just about everything you can do in journalism, which is really my first question. And that is, I've often regarded you as the Walter Cronkite of modern journalism. You are smart, you're articulate, you're fair, you're balanced, and you're trusted. Why are you not a major news anchor either on network television or cable television?
Well, thank you very much. Very nice introduction. Because I don't want to do that anymore. You know, when I first started out in my career, I really thought that was the goal, right? To like get into that evening news spot and sort of have the authority of Uncle Walter. And then shortly thereafter, I realized, okay, that's not really what I want to do at all. You can't express any personality in that role. And I want to be in a job where I can express personality. And that really meant more of a cable news role. And I really enjoyed my cable news role until it sucked all of my energy out of me and left me with absolutely no time and no energy and no joy left for my family, which has, become my first priority. When I started at Fox, I wasn't even married, never mind had kids. And then my viewers watch me have 3 kids over the year. And as it turns out, they become pretty important to you. So
they do.
I'm finding a balance now in this new world of podcasting that will allow me, hopefully, to do it all.
Well, can you do it all? I mean, today you're regarded as somebody who is on neither extreme, and we're seeing a movement of the media. The mainstream media tends to be dominated by left-wing ideology. The new media, the Ben Shapiro, the talk shows, the Rush Limbaugh, is dominated primarily by the right. Is there room for people like you and me who are centrist? Maybe you're a centrist who looks a little bit more to the conservative side, me a little bit more to the liberal side. Is there room for people like us who tell it as it is in today's war between the right and the left on the media?
I think so. I think you're right. I mean, if perfectly center is a 5 and there aren't that many people who are there, maybe you're a 4, maybe I'm a 6. On a couple things, I'm a 4, or maybe an issue or 2, you're a 6. But yeah, generally we're in the center. And I do think there's room. I mean, even when I did the Kelly file, I didn't do it from a Republican perspective. I did it from the same perspective I have now, which is pretty non-ideological. And we were the #1 show in cable news. We had the highest rated show in that key advertising demo, which is the one they want, in all of cable news. And so there is an audience for that. And even now, since I launched the podcast, it's only 3 weeks old, we've been #1 in news commentary virtually the entire 3 weeks. So there is an audience. It's just, as you know, Alan, that the reasonable middle usually is busy leading their lives and not devoting themselves to commentary or consuming news obsessively. They want to stay abreast, they want to stay informed, but they're not going to sort of march out of the streets yelling, "Be reasonable!" They're there, and they do take smart, reasonable offerings when they see them.
And that's the best news I've heard in a long time. The fact that your podcast and your show was so popular. I want to make a personal comment about your show. You're a great hero of the Me Too movement, and appropriately so. What you did exposing predatory practices at Fox is remarkable, and every victim of sexual abuse, sexual harassment, sexual improprieties should be thanking you forever. But on your show, you were the first person to give me an opportunity to disprove the false charges against me, and you basically showed support for my position. Now, did that cause you any grief? You were on the one hand exposing real predators, on the other hand you were giving me an opportunity to show that I was a victim of a false accusation.
Not really, because back then people weren't really taking that hard a look at you. When Virginia Roberts first came forward against you, it was like more about other things, and so probably today they'd give me a harder time, for putting you on the show. But as you know, I couldn't care less. Like, I don't care what people think.
And you would still do it today.
I'm a lawyer, and I'm gonna look at it through a factual lens. And when the allegations against you came up back then, and even since then, I took a hard look. I like you and I respect you, and you've always been a legal hero of mine. But if I'm going to interview you, I got to look at it objectively. Say, okay, I read your book. I read everything Virginia Roberts wrote, her allegations and her complaint, what her lawyers have said, the back and forth you guys have had, the numerous litigations. I read everything that the Miami Herald wrote about you, so I knew what your detractors were saying. And I got to say, this woman, only she, and I guess you ultimately know the truth, but she is an established liar. I mean, she's told many, many lies. Now, that doesn't mean everything she said is a lie.
That's right.
I believe her allegations against Jeffrey Epstein, but that if you look at the history of what she said about you, it's deeply problematic. So that doesn't mean I'm endorsing Ellen Dershowitz. It means I'm endorsing facts. And people shouldn't judge you or any other man or woman accused without getting neck deep in the facts. And until you've done that, you should really be quiet, because I hate people's knee-jerk instinct to just take somebody down, somebody powerful, somebody rich, somebody super smart, somebody who's at Harvard like you, who's had movies made about him. I think there's too much of a knee-jerk instinct to say, screw him. And sometimes, even when you have an actual victim like Virginia Roberts was of Jeffrey Epstein, and I'm sure others, that it doesn't mean every single allegation they raise is true.
Well, this necessarily leads to the next question. If as soon as this interview is over, your phone rings and it's, "Hey, Megyn, this is Jeffrey Toobin. Can you give me some advice as to how you think I should handle the current allegations against me? A, would you take the call? And B, what advice would you give him?"
I say, don't do any more handling. There's been enough handling. No more. That's enough. I'm like so mortified by what happened to him. And my first instinct when I saw that there's this guy, the CNN legal analyst, CNN legal analyst and New Yorker guy who's written all these books on the Supreme Court, was, who in their right mind, forget women, no woman would come anywhere near this, but I think 99% of men who you want to engage in self-pleasure, who the hell does it when you're anywhere near a Zoom? When you're anywhere near a Zoom. And his defense was like, I thought I turned the camera off.
Yeah.
He didn't even say, I thought the Zoom call was over. He's like, I thought I had muted it. Like, what is going on? So I have zero desire to help Jeffrey Toobin, because everyone's flawed. Okay, I realize that. People make mistakes. Human sexuality is a complicated thing. But don't get out there and do your holier than thou routine about people like Brett Kavanaugh when you are allegedly having an affair with your best friend's girlfriend, trying to encourage her to have an abortion. These are the allegations against him. Jerking off in the middle of a work Zoom call. I'm sorry, but could you stop the holier than thou routine? Because I'm really having trouble buying it. If you could just stick to Supreme Court analysis.
You know, it's interesting because I tried to write him an email because, he's a friend, a former student. We have debated a lot on television. And I try to write him an email which says, look, my thoughts are with you. I hope you survive this. I think you will overcome this. It got bounced back. But the reason I used exactly those words is because you may remember this, but right after I made my speech on the floor of the United States Senate, I went to the White House for a Middle East thing, and I sat behind the current Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, who was in trouble for what he had done to an NPR reporter. And in the middle, when there was a moment of silence, I put my arm on his shoulder because I was right in back of him. And I said, Mike, my former student, I'm thinking about you, and I hope you will overcome this. And Jeffrey Toobin did a whole segment on that, attacking me for showing support for a former student who had done something wrong. I didn't support what he had done at NPR, but Toobin came after me ferociously. And so I wanted to write him just a nice email using the same words toward him, my former student, as I did use toward Mike Pompeo, my former student, but it got bounced back. So
my impression of him, even though he has a obviously very smart legal mind, is he's so blinded by his partisanship that I no longer can rely on anything he tells me. He's the guy out there. I feel like most of this push to pack the Supreme Court that's happening on the left right now was started by him in his New Yorker article saying, hey, we have options. That's crazy talk. Only a hyper partisan guy would even talk about that as a realistic option if you know anything about the Supreme Court, which does. So I don't really care about Jeffrey Toobin. I have to say, I don't really feel bad for him and what's happening to him. And I think most women in America had the same reaction I had, which is, WTF? Like,
I feel bad for him. I feel bad for him only because, I've known him for a long time. The other point about Jeffrey Toobin is he's been wrong about everything. Every single prediction he made, every single statement he made about any potential Supreme Court decision, about what was going to happen, turned out to be wrong. And I turned out to be right on every prediction I made, not because I'm smarter than Toobin, because I don't let ideology interfere with my analysis. I do what Oliver Wendell Holmes says the job of a lawyer is, to predict what the courts will do in fact, not what we want them to do. Right. And so he turned out to always be wrong. I turned out always to be right. People hated me for being right. People loved him for being wrong, but I still do hope he
But
gets
can I
over
tell you,
this.
so that's the difference. Like, it's better to be driven by your own hubris than by your own ideology. Your hubris in wanting to be right was greater than your hubris in wanting to toe the party line. And that's why you've gotten more right than he has. And I feel like I've been through that myself. I've been called lots of names in a lot of these police involved shootings where I've said, this is how I see it going. And I'm listening to the witnesses and this is what they're saying. People say racist, racist, racist. And you say, you can say what you want, but let's just see how it plays out. And I have yet to be wrong about a single one of them.
I think you just complimented me by talking about my hubris, and I will take it as a compliment, so I appreciate that. Speaking about the subjectivity of the media, let's compare for one moment the New York Times, I thought, brilliant expose of Donald Trump's taxes, which they probably obtained illegally, because it's impossible to imagine anybody who had legal possession of Donald Trump's taxes handing them over to the Times. It had to be either his lawyer, his accountant, somebody from the IRS. And that's good journalism. That's what they do. Of course, that got publicity all over the world. Compare that with the laptop of Hunter Biden, which Facebook and Twitter and major news media are not going to cover. Look, I'm a liberal Democrat, so I don't have a horse in this race when it comes to Hunter Biden himself. But I do, as a First Amendment person, care that let's at least get the story out there. Let people investigate. If it's a fake, let it be exposed as a fake. But how do you explain the difference between the way the media has covered the Trump October surprise with the way it has covered or not covered the Hunter Biden media surprise?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they don't really care about hacking or authentic. I mean, like, they published hack Sarah Palin emails. They covered Melania Trump being taped without her knowledge. They put the Trump tax returns on the front page of the New York Times, and then everybody ran after it, not knowing where they got it, not knowing whether it was illegally gotten gains or whether they were, in fact, the tax returns. I mean, how do we know? We don't know. He hasn't confirmed it. No problem. But if it's bad for Biden, it's really, is it bad for Biden or helpful for Biden? That's really the standard they're going by. The Hunter Biden story would have the media salivating if it were a Don Trump Jr. story. They'd be chasing down every lead to try to figure out, was Donald Trump Jr. drunk in some computer repair shop down in Delaware, dropping off a laptop he never obtained, with dirty pictures of himself on there, doing Jeffrey Toobin-like stuff, and a bunch of emails documenting just graft and corruption at the highest levels that may actually reveal that the vice president, the then sitting vice president, Joe Biden, was taking a piece of what the son was doing. I mean, the double standard is disgusting. And I realize that the post reporting is a little tenuous. It's like some legally blind dude in Delaware got the computer repaired. How? Then gave it not to the feds, yes, but also to like Rudy Giuliani's lawyer and then Steve Bannon. Like, it smells. That doesn't mean it's wrong. And the fact that nobody's willing to even ask questions or push Joe Biden or Hunter Biden to say it's fake, it's not his laptop, he didn't drop it off, I didn't get a piece of any money, he didn't get 10 million bucks a year from the Chinese, he didn't get an extra 25,000 a month from Burisma, all the stuff that you should be asking. No interest.
So if you were the moderator for the next and final debate, how would you frame the question to former Vice President Biden?
I would have to put the denials in the question, because you always try to get past what you know they're going to say. Like, I won't dignify this with a response. This is Russian disinformation. I'd say something just off the top of my head like, well, the director of national intelligence says this is not based on Russian disinformation. I understand you believe it is, but there are real questions about ethics raised in this reporting. And will you commit now to put the matter to bed once and for all by putting Hunter Biden out for an interview with me or with anybody to answer the following questions? Was it his laptop? Did he drop it off at that Delaware computer store? Did he take an extra 25,000 bucks a month from Burisma? Did he introduce the third person at Burisma, third person in control, to you at the White House a week before you cracked down on them and said that prosecutor had to go at his request? Like, you could just do pick your top 4 bullets and make him say he won't do anything about it. That alone will tell the story.
You really are the Walter Cronkite of current journalism. I mean, that is absolutely brilliant. How you would I mean, you're a lawyer. You're a great lawyer, and great lawyers make great questioners. And so, the question is at this point, what do you think is going to happen with the media in the future? Are they going to have people like you asking questions like that, or is it going to be the kind of softball questions that we saw in some of the town halls and not in others of the town halls? How are we going to get the information? Or let me put the question a little bit more directly to you. You've told us where you get your information when you want to do an interview. When you interviewed me, you went back and you read everything against me, everything for me, everything. Where do you get your facts on a daily basis? Where do you and your husband and your children, where do you go to want to know what the real news is today?
Well, to my apartment here in New York, where I am, I get both the Journal and the Times delivered every morning.
Yeah, me too.
And that's one way of starting, right? Both sides. And then every morning I go to realclearpolitics.com, which posts editorials from the left and the right on every issue. So if you're going to get something beating up on Trump and his polls, you're going to get something defending Trump and his polls. And it's up to you as the discerning reader to glean a set of facts. I mean, it's almost like putting one transparency on top of another, and some facts that both sides may not even know they're agreeing on will emerge. But it's a lamentation of mine that you have to work so hard for it. And, to the subject we started with on this, truth, there is still truth. It's not a post-factual world. And if you're a truth teller, you're not afraid of the truth. And so if Joe Biden were telling the truth, he wouldn't be running from this. He would be saying, here's Hunter. Yes, he was on drugs, but he's going to tell you the truth. Hunter, go. I never dropped the laptop. And Joe Biden's going to say, I don't care what my schedule said or didn't say. I never met with this guy. It didn't happen. That's what a truth teller sounds like. And to be honest, same thing on the Trump side. A truth teller doesn't say, I don't remember when I had my last negative COVID test. They don't wiggle like that. They say, what I can tell you for sure, Savannah Guthrie, is that I definitely didn't test positive until that Friday night that we came out with it. I don't remember getting tested the day, but I can tell you for sure there was nothing positive prior to that debate. That's what a truth teller sounds like.
I agree with you completely, but it doesn't always work. As you remember, when I was accused, I said publicly, I will never refuse to answer a single question on any subject or refuse to produce a single document because I have nothing to hide. Ask away. I have lived a life which is without sin in terms of my personal life, so I have nothing to hide. Ask me any question in the world. I didn't get much of a benefit from that. People said, oh, he said this or he said this, and they publish the accusation along with the simple denial. Oh, Dershowitz denies, Bill Clinton denies, Prince Andrew denies. They lump me with all the other people who have refused to answer questions, though I have never refused to answer a question. So what advice do you have for me? You wouldn't give Jeff Toobin any advice, but what advice do you have for me?
I do have thoughts on your situation. If I were you, I would stop talking about this altogether. I would say, I've said all I'm going to say on this. Can I swear on this podcast? I don't.
Yeah.
You're Alan fucking Dershowitz. Like, stop answering questions about this. You hired the former head of the FBI to go investigate your case. You called for the existing FBI and the existing U.S. Attorney of the Southern District of New York to investigate these allegations. You've spoken to it under oath. Like, you're done. Don't be defensive about this anymore. You had a stellar career. Your legal credentials speak for themselves. If you were really this terrible a person, I believe there would have been a pattern. There would have been a pattern of allegations against you, similar as we saw to Roger Ailes, to Harvey Weinstein, to Jeffrey Epstein, even to Bill Clinton. I don't know what he did or didn't do in that case, but like, he had a pattern with women. You should just at this point say, and now I'm done. And be your awesome self and let people figure it out, because the ones who are holding on to this now are ones who don't like you and you can't persuade them.
My wife is going to love you. She has been pushing that argument for a long time. The problem is it's having a potential big impact on my life. The 92nd Street Y, where I spoke for years, every year, canceled me. Universities are canceling me. They won't let me speak on Israel because there are protests. I'd never been satisfied with the story going away. I want to disprove it categorically. But, you make a point and you may be right and you're very smart. So I think I may very well listen to you.
Good. And I think in this day and age, especially with the Me Too movement, having gone it's gotten so radical. It started as something noble, and it's crossed over to this thing where we've gotten rid of due process for anyone accused, a knee-jerk reaction that everyone who gets accused is guilty, which is totally false. I think until we come off of that weird place, there's no point in trying to persuade these people. I mean, like, when somebody says awful things about me, like, I'm like, peace out. That's great. You can think what you want about me. You don't know me, and clearly you don't want to know me. And there are a lot of places you can go, I can go, where you don't have to have these petty battles where people just want to sling their empty arrows at you. So just stay the places that get you, that understand your gifts. You don't have to be the 92nd Street.
Well, I appreciate that.
Life. A lot of people know who I am, and it's all good.
I appreciate that. I have actually proposed the creation of an informal Me Too court of perhaps former judges, justices, men, women, lawyers, non-lawyers, say a 5-person court. And you'd have one day if you're accused to bring your evidence, or if you're an accuser, one day to bring your evidence, and let the 5 judges decide guilty, not guilty, or inconclusive. But we have no process today for establishing guilt or innocence, and I think both sides lose because the truth becomes who shouts louder. Obviously, that was the name of the program on TV, the loudest voice in the room, and today the loudest voice prevails. But I'm going to take very, very serious.
Yeah. Look at it this way. I'll steal this word on it. You're still you. You have so much that you've accomplished and such a great reputation. Like, thank God you have all that. I think about, like, these young guys on college campuses who get accused with no due process at all. Right now, it's still, even though Betsy DeVos has tried to reverse a lot of this, it's still happening on numerous college campuses where if you get accused, you have no due process, you have no right to a lawyer in these kangaroo courts they make you submit to. You have no right of cross-examination of the woman accusing you, and you have no right to discovery. And so there was a case at Amherst where a guy, he couldn't get the girl's emails, and all of her texts showed, after the fact, he found out from a whistleblower who got the stuff to him after he'd been found guilty. All of her texts saying it was all me, I was no angel, like she was all guilty. And after he allegedly sexually assaulted her, he left the dorm room, and she had another guy come over, and she had sex with him. Would have been helpful to know that before his kangaroo court. Didn't. Look. He wound up appealing to the federal district court. They wouldn't reverse it. Like, this guy's life was ruined, and he's a kid. So, like, I feel like you and me and people like us need to be helping these young kids who get canceled, get their lives ruined. They don't have a national name to fall back on yet.
I agree with you, and I have agreed to, I'm suing Netflix because, they lied to me. They said they would put on the evidence that I gave them, tape recordings of her lawyer, tape recordings of her best friend, her own emails. They didn't put any of that on the air after promising me they would, and I'm suing them, and I'm going to give half the money to causes involving women who have been abused, and half the money to defend people who have been falsely accused, because I think those are both sides of a very important equation. I have just one more final question for you. You've been so generous with your time. In Israel, they say a pessimist is somebody who says, "Oh, things are so bad, they can't possibly get worse." And an optimist says, "Yes, they can." So are you an optimist or a pessimist? You've seen the best, you've seen the worst, you've reported on every major leader from Putin to Obama. So are you an optimist or a pessimist?
I'm an optimist in the truest sense of that word. I don't think the media has a very bright future. I don't see journalism reviving to the place where it's actually trustworthy. But I think the system finds a way. And I think what's going to happen in media, just to start with, is people will develop individual relationships with hosts or anchors or personalities they trust. And that I see as the future, and the digital world has been very helpful for that. It's one of the reasons why I sort of placed my future bets there with myself and the podcast. But I believe truth, too, will find a way. And that's why I don't look at Trump with all, he came in as a wrecking ball, and he did wreck a lot. A lot of it needed wrecking. And I don't believe what John Bolton says now, which is the country can't survive 4 more years of Trump. This is the United States of America. We're going to be fine. With Trump, with Biden, either one of them. We're having a rough time right now. But the people who are like, it's never been this bad. It's like, not the Civil War. That wasn't like, we managed to make it through that. We made it through the 1960s, where I know you were actually alive then. So I think people have a need for drama. And I think it's been a long while since the country's had like a massive devastation akin to 9/11 that really scared us. COVID scared us, but not in a way that brought us together. And I think people might have a little bit too much time in their hands right now to worry about minutia, like their lady parts, the color of their skin, defining the entire world by these things that we can't control rather than seeing the bigger picture. And I think the bigger picture is you already won the lottery if you were born in the United States of America. You got it made. It's nothing but blue skies ahead. It doesn't mean you won't have a couple of battles. As long as you think of yourself well, you think of the country well, you'll do fine. The biggest battle we have is pulling people out of that negativity and that knee-jerk need to be smaller than they are and find compadres who are smaller than they are to lift themselves up. It has exactly the opposite effect of the one you're going after. So bottom line is 2 thumbs up for the country, for the future. Maybe not for media, but for you and me, we're good. I think we'll be fine.
I was a pessimist before this interview. You've turned me into an optimist. You have expressed views that are so compellingly true and accurate. And one reason I'm an optimist is you're an important part of the future. And I hope you continue to go from strength to strength and from truth to truth and keep doing what you're doing. You still are the Walter Cronkite. Walter Cronkite may be a different person today, but you're still the person that I think America trusts to get to the truth. And it's been such an honor for me to have you as my first guest on the Dersh Show. And thank you so, so much for being willing to appear here.
Thank you, Professor, and my regards to your smart and lovely wife.
Thank you.
Lots of love.